beginning of your creativity, the imagination? I mean, certainly also...
Well, I'll tell you what the connection was. It's interesting. I wanted to be a writer from the time I was 8 years old, and started trying to write. And one of the first things I wrote was a courtroom sketch with a judge and a funny defendant, and that was a direct imitation of the sketches that we had in the house. My father had about a stack of sketches, almost a foot deep, of old burlesque routines, and often old friends from burlesque. Once my father got a job at Warner Brothers, making movies. He was no longer in burlesque, no longer on the road. He had traveled in nightclubs, doing nightclub shows and USO shows because the war was on. Shortly, not long after I was born, and so old friends from burlesque would come over and they'd do the old sketches. So around from the age of 8 or 9, I was watching and taking part in these burlesque sketches. So I really have roots in burlesque, although I wasn't old enough to have performed in it. Then when I was, I don't know if you know that Abbott and Costello, who were very popular in the early days of television, came from burlesque, and all their famous routines, like Who's on First, I believe they did when they were in burlesque. And that's how my father knew those sketches. And so when the war was on, and I was about 9 years old, I would go with my father to the Hollywood canteen, and we would perform for the soldiers and sailors, sometimes a couple of thousand people. And that was the first time I would perform in public. And we did Who's on First, and I did the part that Lou Costello had done, and my father did Bud Abbott's part.
Great writing.
Yeah, well, it's a classic sketch. It's a classic joke. The misunderstanding that the comic has in that is really the misunderstanding that's at the basis of a lot of jokes. And different words, but the same idea, same thoughts.